Was El Paso one of the most dangerous cities in the country until they put up a fence? Well, not exactly. Hi, thanks for watching. Today is Friday, Fact Check Friday, and I would like to go over a story that I think is important, and it does illustrate the state of fact-checking today. Now, this is an old story. This came up in Trump's State of the Union. Snopes tackled this story in February of this year, but I wanted to go over it because I think there's some very important pieces in it. And I happen to know a little bit about this as I lived near El Paso and visited probably twice a month during the late 80s and early 90s. So I do have some experience here. But let's take a look at the article on Snopes. Was El Paso one of the most dangerous cities in the U.S. before a border fence was built? And they rate that as false. And so far, so good, because El Paso was never one of the most dangerous cities in the U.S. In fact, it's kind of unfair to compare El Paso to many major cities in the U.S. because the demographics are so different. If you don't know, El Paso is like over 80% white, and it doesn't have the same racial problems that many of the U.S. major cities have, just because there's the lack of diversity there. But Snopes produced a video, so let's take a look at it. It says, was El Paso one of the most dangerous cities in the U.S. before a border fence was built?
El Paso is a calm and peaceful and pretty city. It's a great place. Juarez is violent and chaotic. It's one of the most dangerous cities in the world. How can these two places exist side by side? Well, simple. There's a wall between them.
And here's where it gets weird, okay? Because what Tucker said is 100% true. Juarez, Mexico is one of the most dangerous cities in the world. El Paso is a relatively safe city. There is a wall in between the two. Now, if that's the reason why, perhaps. I mean, we don't know exactly that that's the reason why, but what he said is true. I don't know why that they're putting this up as false. And they go on to say that El Paso was ranked one of the country's safest cities as far back as 2005, 3 years before the border fence was built. Well, that's where Snopes is lying, okay? They're pretending that there wasn't a border fence there when the border fence was built in 2008. Yes, they put up a bigger fence in 2008, but the original fence was put up in 1993. Okay, and so up until that point, the only border that I remember when I was a teenager was the Rio Grande. There was a big cement, paved cement river bottom, and you could just cross it. There was nothing there. And in 1993, they had Operation Hold the Line, where they brought in border security guards to be, every couple yards or whatever, all across the border. And at the same time, they did put up a chain link fence. Now, it wasn't huge. To my memory, it was maybe 8 or 10 feet tall that was often just cut. But they did put up a fence at that time. And so to make the claim that the border fence was put up in 2008 is not true. Yes, it became much bigger. It was, 30 feet or 18 feet or something. A much bigger fence was put up in 2008, but that was to replace and improve the fence that was put up in 93.
The border city of El Paso, Texas, used to have extremely high rates of violent crime, considered one of our nation's most dangerous cities. Walls work and walls save lives.
Okay, so here Trump, and in the State of the Union, he's saying that El Paso was once this horrible place. It was never one of the most dangerous cities in the U.S., so that's not true. But when he makes the claim that walls work, well, they may. Why do we have walled communities or gated communities? Because they're safer, right? They do work. But his claim that El Paso was so dangerous, not so much. So Snopes backs themselves up by saying that they looked at the crime data from the FBI, the UCR, Uniform Crime Report, and that data shows that the violent crime in El Paso took a dive after 93. So when you look at the crime stats for El Paso, it did peak in like 92, 93, and then it just went down after that. Coincidentally, that was a national trend. Most cities peaked around that time and went down. So crime in El Paso and the US kind of peaked around 92 and just went down after that. Can you say that crime went down in El Paso because of the fence? Well, not necessarily. But that may be one of the factors in the drop of crime rate. But all the other cities in the US didn't have fences around them, and their crime rates went down as well. So we don't know that that's necessarily the case. And so they end the video with a little quote from Chief Aaron Hull, who says, El Paso's violent crime was at its peak in 1992. What did make a difference was a flood of Border Patrol agents who began Operation Hold the Line in 1993. And that is true. But what's not in this quote is that they put up a chain link fence at the time that they were doing Operation Hold the Line in 1993. And that's kind of an important detail that Snopes leaves out of this story. And Snopes ends the video with this slide that says, data shows that the border fence did not exert a positive impact on reducing violent crime in El Paso. And they did this by looking at the rates of crime before and after the improvement to the wall happened in 2008. But they're not taking into account the original fence that went up in 1993. It's an important detail that they leave out that totally changes everything about this story. And that's why I think that fact-checking is important. We need to be able to rely on fact-checkers and not just pick out specific facts that will back up their narrative. To review, El Paso, never one of the most dangerous cities in the country. The crime rate did drop in 93 at the same time that they did put up a fence. However, crime rates dropped all over the country, so that may not be the reason for it. These stories are complex, need a little nuance, and that's one of the biggest problems that I have with fact checkers like Snopes. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments. Peace.